They fired me, before my coffee even had time to cool. One minute I was pouring oat milk into my usual morning brew half awake, halfway through a Monday. The next, I was being summoned to the corner office by Chase Donovan, the newly minted CEO, and the founder's son. No hello, no smile, just a sharp, cold command, Julia. My office, now. No meeting on the calendar, no warning, just a gut punch, waiting in a chair across from his desk. You're no longer needed here, he said flatly, not even bothering to look up. We're heading in a different direction. My ears rang. My fingers went numb around the handle of my mug. I'd been with Brightwell & Co. for 12 years, led client strategies, negotiated million-dollar deals, trained half the team sitting just outside his shiny glass walls. But none of it mattered, not to him. To Chase, I was old furniture, something Daddy left behind. That didn't match the sleek new image he was going for. He didn't fire me for poor performance. He fired me because I reminded him of everything he hadn't earned. But this isn't a story about a woman who gave up. It's about how I took it all back piece by piece without ever raising my voice. And by the end, the person who erased me, he disappeared himself. This story will make you angry, it'll make you cheer, and trust me, the ending, it'll surprise you. Before we dive in, go ahead and grab a cup of tea, turn up the volume, and don't forget to comment, let us know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is in your local area. We love seeing how far these stories travel. By the time I got home that morning, my inbox had already been wiped clean. No goodbye email, no transfer of responsibilities, no trace that I had ever existed inside the walls of Brightwell & Co. The project dashboard I built over 6 years now, assigned to Team Strategy General. A vague placeholder that stripped every thread of identity from my work. My ID badge deactivated, Slack channels gone. Even the folder on the shared drive labeled JH Master Files had been renamed Archived to Review. It was like I'd been surgically removed. I sat in my car, still in the office parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with both hands. My coffee had gone stone cold beside me, the same cup I never even got to drink. The thing is, I didn't just work at Brightwell, I built part of it. The Orlean account, our biggest international client, was something I had poured nearly a year of my life into. I'd traveled across 3 time zones, learned business-level French just to connect more deeply, and created a strategic roadmap so tailored it became the company's internal gold standard. We were 2 weeks from final signing, when I got the boot. And I wasn't just the lead on that deal. I was the only authorized liaison on the contract. That clause was added 3/4 of a year ago after a botched negotiation nearly cost us a different client. Only one name could legally represent Brightwell in the Orlean deal mine. Chase didn't even know that. Or maybe he didn't care. Either way, his arrogance had just cracked something wide open. But the worst part wasn't the erasure. It was how easily it was done. No one asked questions. No one pushed back. Not HR. Not the people I mentored. Not even the ones I'd stayed late to help with presentations or crisis calls. They all just moved on. I remember scrolling through my phone, looking at names of people I thought might check in. No one did. Except for one message. From Morgan, my old intern, now in procurement. Saw what happened. It's not fair. But you always told me don't let unfairness stop you. I didn't know it then. But that message, it was the first spark of something bigger. Because while I sat there thinking it was all over, someone else, someone I hadn't spoken to in months, was picking up the phone, and he was about to ask a question that would change everything. The call came just after 9 the next morning. My phone buzzed once, then again an unknown number. I almost didn't answer. Part of me couldn't handle another blow, but something made me pick it up. Maybe instinct, maybe curiosity. Julia, it's Arthur Donovan. My heart skipped. The voice was slower than I remembered, raspier but unmistakable. Arthur Donovan, the man who built Brightwell from a one-room office above a printing shop, the man who hired me 12 years ago. After a single conversation and a coffee I spilled on his shoes. I just walked into the office, he said, tension tightening every word. Why the hell did you pack up and leave? I sat up straighter. Your son fired me. Silence. Then slower now, like he was trying to stay composed, when yesterday I said. He told me I wasn't a fit anymore. That the company was moving forward, and I wasn't part of it. Another pause. Papers flipped. A drawer slammed shut. Julia, he said carefully, did Chase read your contract? I frowned. What do you mean he's scheduled to finalize Orlean today, isn't he? Yes, we were supposed to meet their team at 11. Everything was set. Jesus, he muttered. That clause, did he miss it? He must have. Clause 17. I felt the shift. His tone changed. Urgency. You're the only authorized negotiator on that account, Arthur said. That clause was added after the Delphi fiasco. Remember, legal made it ironclad. No one else at this company can sign that deal but you. Not ethically. Not legally. Not even practically. I froze. The air around me went still. Chase hadn't read it. He had no idea. He'd fired the one person the deal couldn't proceed without. And the clock was ticking. Arthur didn't say anything else. He didn't have to. The silence between us said everything. He knew what his son had done, and he was furious. I sat there a long time after the call ended. The bitterness hadn't faded. Not entirely. But now, something else was taking shape. A sense of control. A sharp, clear edge I hadn't felt in days. Chase thought he'd won. But he'd just fired the only person who could save him, and I had no intention of making it easy. Because by the end of the day, phones would start ringing again. And this time, I wouldn't be the one caught off guard. I didn't call Chase back. Not when he tried my number once. Not the second time. Not after the third call went straight to voicemail and his assistant started emailing with phrases like urgent clarification and reinstatement opportunity. I let the silence speak for itself. The same silence he gave me when he handed me a pink slip like it was nothing more than a coffee receipt. Instead, I wrote one email. Short, precise, deliberate. Sent directly to Arthur Donovan. Arthur, I'm willing to consider returning to assist with the Orlean negotiations under specific conditions. I want to speak with you directly first. 10 minutes later, he replied, Come in, my office. Noon, perfect timing. The Orlean team was due at 1, no room for error, no space for Chase to maneuver. And now every department that had looked away the day before, they were watching. Because when I walked back into Brightwell through the front lobby, not the employee entrance, every head turned. The reception staff stood the moment they saw me. Ms. Hart. Right this way. Mr. Donovan is expecting you. I followed the hallway I'd walked 1,000 times, but today it felt different, like the walls were listening. People glanced up from their desks. Conversations stalled mid-sentence. Some eyes were curious, others nervous. Arthur met me outside his office. No handshake, just a nod and a quiet, thank you for coming. We talked. Not long, but enough. I laid out my terms clearly. Full reinstatement. Written authority over the Orlean deal. Contract protections. And zero interference. From Chase. I wasn't asking for special treatment. I was demanding the respect I had earned. He agreed without hesitation. And just like that, the power shifted. When I stepped back out onto the open floor, Chase was there. Arms folded, pretending to talk strategy with a junior exec. But his eyes, they followed my every step. I didn't stop. I didn't blink. I walked past like I had somewhere more important to be because I did. The boardroom had been prepared. The Orlean documents were reviewed. The clock read 12:57. 3 minutes until showtime. Behind the glass walls, I saw him. Pacing, restless, caged. He still didn't understand how much he'd lost. Not yet. But he would. Soon. Because the next 90 minutes, they weren't just about a contract. They were about reminding everyone, especially him, exactly who I was, and exactly what he tried to erase. At precisely 1 o'clock, the glass doors opened, and the Orléans team stepped into the boardroom. 3 men in tailored suits, 1 woman with a leather-bound notebook, and Mr. Sébastien Laurent himself, their CEO. He was known for being sharp, unshakably formal, allergic to last-minute surprises. I stood to greet him, extended my hand, and said, "Bienvenue, Monsieur Laurent. C'est un plaisir de vous revoir." His brows lifted, surprised. Then he smiled. A small, rare gesture from a man who rarely did. "You remembered?" he said softly. "Respect goes a long way, Ms. Hart." We sat, and the room fell quiet. I could feel the pressure settle heavy like a coat no one asked to wear. Arthur was there, but silent, seated near the end of the table. Chase hovered behind the glass, excluded but watching. I led the presentation calmly, step by step, from cultural alignment strategies to digital asset conversion and finally into pricing tiers, each point backed by months of analytics, client feedback, and language-specific rollout plans. I was ready for every possible objection, and when one came, I welcomed it. "I understand your concern," I told their legal director, "but that clause was added in anticipation of EU data shifts. Page 14, Section C, highlighted for your convenience." He blinked, glanced down, then nodded. The final moment came when I slid the translated contract across the table, Arabic on one side, English on the other. The Orléans team exchanged quiet glances. Mr. Laurent looked at me, nodded once, and signed. No drama, no confusion, no chase. A clean deal closed with quiet precision. When they left, Arthur walked over slowly. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he exhaled like he'd been holding his breath for hours. "You saved us," he said. "I owe you more than just an apology." "But I wasn't here for apologies. You owe your company a leader," I replied. "One who knows the difference between power and responsibility." He didn't argue. Later that day, as I gathered the materials and prepared to leave the boardroom, I saw Chase, still lingering near the hallway. His face had changed. No longer smug, just pale. He caught my eye, then looked away. He finally understood no seat of power is safe when you haven't done the work to earn it. But as I turned back to the glass table gathering the signed pages, I had a feeling this wasn't over. Men like Chase don't disappear. They recalculate. And I knew. I had to be ready for whatever came next. For a few days, it felt like peace had returned. People smiled again in the break room. Emails came through without incident. Even the intern I'd trained years ago dropped off a handwritten thank you note with a tiny coffee voucher tucked inside. But the thing is, just when you start to breathe again, that's usually when the air shifts. It began with a delay. A simple reimbursement for my train fare to the Orléans meeting, marked in review far longer than usual. Then came a document I submitted for legal sign-off. It bounced back, unsigned, no explanation, no traceable issue. At first, I brushed it off. Growing pains, miscommunication. Nothing new in a company trying to find its balance. But then I got a call. One of our international partners in Tokyo confused about an email I had sent. It contained an outdated pricing chart from my company address, forwarded to multiple contacts. I hadn't sent anything. I checked my sent folder. Nothing there. IT investigated. The email had been composed from a shared workstation near the marketing bullpen. My credentials had been manually entered. Could have been someone using cached login they offered, but I knew better. This wasn't a glitch. This was sabotage. And I'd seen this move before. Back when I was fresh out of college, I worked under a VP who couldn't fire people directly. So instead, he starved them of responsibility, rerouted their projects, quietly rewrote their reputations until resignation felt like their own idea. At 22, I didn't know how to fight that. But now, I document everything, every inconsistency, every unexplained delay, every bounced file, every altered line. I built a paper trail so clean not even the cleverest backstab could erase it. Then one afternoon, I heard it. Walking past the small conference room near accounting, I caught his voice louder than it should have been for a private conversation. "She's erratic," Chase said. "Since she came back, she's been unstable, not the same under pressure." Another voice answered quieter. I couldn't catch all of it, just the phrase, but she closed Orlean. "She got lucky," Chase snapped. "We can't run a business on luck." I stopped walking. Not out of fear, out of clarity. He wasn't trying to fire me again, he was trying to discredit me, quietly, strategically, just like before. But if that's how he wanted to play, then he hadn't learned what happens when you underestimate the wrong person. Twice. I wasn't the only one noticing the strange patterns. A week after the forged email incident, Arthur quietly launched an internal audit. No press release. No company-wide memo. Just a sudden uptick in system access reviews, and a temporary conference room turned into a full-blown war room. Files stacked to the ceiling, whiteboards filled with diagrams, laptops glowing well into the night. I was called in on a Tuesday afternoon. The lead auditor, David, greeted me with a calm nod and pulled up a screen. "We'd like to walk you through a few anomalies," he said, "and confirm your awareness of them." He tapped the keyboard and up came the list: timestamps, device IDs, login trails. A spreadsheet I had supposedly edited with a crucial figure changed. An email marked urgent but never written by me. Every item traced back to shared machines. "What you're looking at," David said carefully, "is targeted. It's not random system noise. Someone's trying to make your work look inconsistent." I nodded. "I've been tracking it too." He raised an eyebrow. "You kept notes." I pulled out a small notebook. Dates, times, what was altered, who had system access that day. He leaned forward, flipping through a few pages. "This is thorough." "I've seen this before," I said. "I know how these things snowball if you don't stop them early." He nodded slowly. "We've also traced unusual access patterns back to a secondary login used frequently by Chase's executive assistant." The air in the room tightened. "We're not making conclusions yet," David added, "but the evidence is stacking in one direction." I folded my arms. "So what now?" He glanced at the other auditors, then back at me. "Mr. Donovan Sr. has asked for a direct briefing. He wants all findings presented to him personally." I sat still. My heart was calm. "Then I'll be there." David hesitated. "You're not required to attend." "I know," I said. "But I need to look everyone in the eye when this comes out." That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of the others who had left Brightwell quietly over the past year. Bright, capable, promising people. Some had just moved on. But now, I wondered how many had been slowly pushed. Just like this. By morning, I knew one thing for sure: if Chase wanted a quiet erasure, he was about to get the loudest silence of his life, and I was going to be in the room when it happened. The executive boardroom felt colder than usual that morning. Maybe it was the air conditioning. Or maybe the quiet tension coiling around the walls. Arthur was already there when I arrived, standing by the window arms, folded face unreadable. David and two auditors followed, their folders thick with data. I took a seat at the far end of the long table. Heart steady. Notes folded neatly in front of me. 10 minutes later, Chase walked in. He was on his phone as if this were just another meeting. But when he saw me, he stopped mid-step. "She's not part of this," he said, looking at Arthur. Arthur didn't turn. "She's here at my request." Chase shifted, eyes darting. "This is a confidential internal review. Then you should have kept it that way," I said calmly. "When you used internal systems to falsify records." He scoffed. "You've got to be kidding." David didn't flinch. He clicked a remote and the screen behind him lit up. "We've traced multiple login attempts tied to your assistant's credentials," he said. All are connected to irregularities targeting Julia's work email. Headers, altered spreadsheets, deleted approvals. Chase leaned forward, still posturing confidence. That proves nothing. Anyone could have used that login. She's bitter because I let her go. I looked him straight in the eyes. You didn't let me go, Chase. You tried to erase me, and you nearly cost this company its most important deal doing it. Arthur finally turned from the window. His face was pale but resolute. I gave you authority too fast, he said. I wanted to believe you were ready, but all I've seen since then is damage. Chase opened his mouth to respond. Arthur raised a hand. No, I'm done listening. The board will review this report. Effective immediately, you are suspended from all duties. The silence that followed was razor sharp. Chase stood there stunned, words forming but never leaving his lips. He looked at me one last time. Not angry, not smug, just lost. Then he turned and walked out. Arthur sat down heavily, the weight of it all finally settling on his shoulders. I failed him, he said, more to himself than to me. You can't lead someone who refuses to learn, I replied. But you can still lead this company? He nodded slowly, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something shift. Not just in the room, but in the foundation of Brightwell itself. Still, I knew it wasn't over. Because power once threatened doesn't just disappear. Sometimes it waits in the dark, hoping no one's watching. 2 weeks passed, Chase hadn't returned, and his name was no longer whispered with urgency, just curiosity, and a touch of disbelief. The final audit report confirmed it all: unauthorized access, falsified data, intentional attempts to undermine internal operations. His suspension quietly became termination. No press release. No formal statement. Just a name. Quietly removed from the leadership directory. I thought I'd feel vindicated. Instead, I just felt steady, like the storm had passed, and I was still standing. Arthur called me into his office on a quiet Thursday afternoon. A folder sat on his desk, but he didn't open it right away. You've shown more leadership in the past month than most people do in a career, he said. You held the company together under pressure, and you did it without ever compromising who you are. He slid the folder across the desk. Inside, a promotion. Chief Strategy Officer. Reporting directly to him. I stared at the title for a moment, then looked up. If I accept this, I said, I want more than a title. I want to rebuild the culture, not just patch it. Arthur nodded. That's exactly why I'm asking you. So I got to work. I reopened conversations that had gone silent. Reached out to employees who had been pushed to the margins. Some had quietly left. Others were still holding on, waiting for change. I brought back Serena from design forced out during a reorganization. Promoted Omar, the data analyst who always had the right insights, but never the right audience. And most importantly, I launched a confidential reporting system. No more hallway whispers. No more fear of retaliation. Everyone deserved a voice, especially those who hadn't yet found theirs. The air around the office began to shift. People looked each other in the eye again. Laughter returned to meetings. It was subtle, but real. One afternoon, a young employee stopped me by the elevator. She'd only joined 2 months ago. Can I ask, how did you stay so calm through all of it? I smiled. I didn't. I just stayed clear. There's a difference. That night, as I turned off the lights in my temporary office, I paused at the glass wall, the one that once held the Orlean negotiation. I remembered the panic, the silence, the decision not to break. And I knew deep down, the real turning point hadn't been the boardroom. It had been the moment I refused to let someone else's chaos define my worth. But one more thing still lingered. Something I couldn't quite shake. Because people like Chase, they don't just disappear. They wait. And and sometimes they try again. A few weeks later, I found myself walking the same hallway where it had all begun. The difference this time wasn't just in the silence, it was in how I carried it. My office had been moved temporarily for renovations. A bigger space, more windows, a view of the courtyard. But what mattered wasn't the size of the desk or the title on the door. It was the nameplate. Julia Hart, Chief Strategy Officer. A quiet acknowledgement of what had been earned. Not given. One afternoon, as I headed out for a late coffee, I paused by the glass wall of the boardroom. The room was empty now, lit only by soft overhead lights and the orange glow of a sky beginning to fade. That room had held so many things: tension, confrontation, redemption. And yet what I remembered most clearly was the moment I walked out of Chase's office that first day, calm, quiet, holding nothing but a half-drunk cup of coffee, and every ounce of self-worth I refused to let go. I didn't need revenge, I needed clarity. And that had always been the difference. People still asked about Chase. I heard rumors he'd been interviewing at firms out of state. One said he was trying to get into startups, another that he'd changed his last name. Arthur never spoke of it publicly. I think he wanted to protect what was left of his son's dignity. Maybe that was a father's last act of love. I didn't ask, because I didn't need to know where Chase went. I knew where I was going. We'd already begun rebuilding. New client initiatives, mentorship circles, strategy meetings that now included voices from every level. And every week someone new stepped forward. Someone who had once stayed silent. Now, sharing ideas they were once too afraid to speak aloud. One of the interns asked me recently, "How do you stay sharp after everything I told him the truth?" You don't always get to choose your battles, but you do get to decide who you become in the middle of them. That's what this story was really about. Not a firing, not a comeback, but a woman who refused to let anyone, even the boss's son, decide her worth. So tell me, have you ever been underestimated? If this story struck a chord, leave a comment and tell us where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. We want to know how far these stories go.